got to level 2. And okay. So here's where we can put in some skills, and this will start giving me bonuses for my cargo. Fuel economy is pretty important, but it's really only good for uh, when I have my own truck. So right now, I think I'm going to go long distance. What you focus on is actually what the game will adapt the all of your jobs towards. And so we'll start seeing a lot more long distance if I buy this, or if I put points into this. But going a little bit longer is not too bad. It gives me a lot of money, and I have new mail. Okay, so I can go to the bank, and I can get a loan, which is going to be absolutely essential. Um, 2,000 bucks a day. That kind of indicates what I'm going to have to make in my jobs. I think I'll wait though. I can borrow $130,000. Well, if we go to the truck dealers, we can go online. Oh, okay. So I can't yet. So I'm going to need something that will get me to Sacramento. Although I could go to the Volvo dealer here and actually see, but I think if I want even a decent truck right away, it's going to be like 150 to 200,000. So I'll do a little bit more, some more jobs, just so I have a buffer, because I'm going to need to make a payment. So let's go back to the job market, quick job, and anything that gets me over to San Francisco, or to Sacramento, I should say. Well, there's this one, but that doesn't pay very much. But I guess we can take it. Used packaging. Now wait a minute. Where am I actually at? That's yeah, I'm not there. I need to actually choose the city that I'm currently in, which is this one, and then it will tell me what jobs are available here. Otherwise, oh no. Okay, so when I have my own truck, I will be stuck in the city that I ended up in. But here, they basically just fly me around. So I can take the one from San Francisco to Sacramento. They basically just send me back to San Francisco because I'm doing it for somebody else. So we'll do this, and then we'll go over, and we will see. Okay, just another truck full of goods from Eddie's. I'm not sure what Eddie's is supposed to be an analog for. The one that we just went to, or the destination, was obviously Walmart. Okay, make that out. There's always this guy sitting here watching the traffic come in. Kind of weird. I'm not sure if I can get out of here. Might just have to end up going for it. Get out here and block traffic a little bit. All right. Oop. Right over the median. It's okay, it's not my truck. And I'm sure the cargo is fine. Have to come to a complete stop before you hit the rest of the stopwalk, crosswalk. Otherwise, the game does not like it, and you will get a ticket. Alright, well, this is pretty much the game. So now that we kind of got all that down, how is everyone? I've got new mail. Yeah, I'm pretty good. It's just been a lazy weekend. I am looking forward to this week, though. I've only got a 3-day week at work, and then I've got 6 days off, and then I've got another 3-day week after that. So, because rather than take a whole week off, I figured out that if I take a Thursday, Friday off, I get a Monday, Tuesday off. And so I'll still get my days off, but I have 2 short weeks bookending that. And I feel like that's a lot better than just having a full week off and then you got to go back to a full week. And at my job, I only get 2 weeks vacation every year. And last year, what I did, I took a week off for one of it, for part of it, but then the next 5 days that I had, I spread out over a month. So I took Fridays off. Oh, come on. Well, since we already hit the violation, we'll just go on through. Um, I took Fridays off for a month, so I got 3-day weekends for a month. So that was kind of nice. But I'm looking forward to it, just so that I can continue working on some projects. Give me time to. And then we can't actually go right on red. You just have to make sure you're stopped. Um, but yeah, I definitely am kind of done working at this place. So I'm hoping to use my time off to kind of get some things going, and maybe I'll be able to quit at the end of summer. The whole well, yeah, I like the board game, but some other things too. Uh, making an income on my own again. Just got to get some things sorted and kind of build a timetable for myself, because obviously all the things that I want to do I can't really do all at once, and so I need to figure out practical things. Kind of like the streaming. Like, I started streaming because I figured this was a pretty easy thing to get into, seeing as how I was already pretty much doing it anyway. So just kind of lining things up like that. The whole lockdown situation has kind of thrown things in disarray, and if we're looking at second wave here in America, that could make things a little bit more difficult. But I'm just ready for a change. This is clearly not a very powerful truck. I didn't have too much power going up that hill, although that is a pretty steep incline over there. But this bridge we have to go over so many times back and forth, which is really unfortunate. Unfortunate in just an impatient driver kind of way, because it's just really kind of annoying for me when I've got a long haul and I got to sit actually playing the game for several hours, and then I got to go slow down. That's how I figured out all these tricks, like driving on the shoulder and just skipping past way stations. Yep. Was not watching the road. Might be taking this turn a little fast. Okay, once we get on the highway, the straight stretch, we should be good to go here. Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's tough for a lot of people. One of the girls in my apartment building uh, was self-employed, and so she had to shut down her business. And so for the last, well, what, 2, 3 months now, she just hasn't had anything. So it's, some people do get the work from home option, but obviously she does not. I don't know if she does, but I kind of feel like the work from home angle, though, is going to be a thing kind of the way the gig economy popped up after 2008. So here's a question for everyone that isn't American, because it's not going to happen here unless we elect Bernie Sanders. Um, so there's a thing called post-capitalism, and as far as I can tell, this is a concept that showed up in like the 60s. And the best way I describe it to people is the Jetsons. You look at George Jetson, and all he does is pretty much go to work, push a button, and then the machines at Spacely Sprockets does the rest. And occasionally he has to go fix a broken machine or whatever. But the majority of his job is just sitting around watching the machines. And this is actually a thing that they kind of figured was going to happen in the 60s. Futurism of the 60s saw this happening a lot, and there's a backlash to the machines taking over. You see that in in Dune, where thinking machines are outlawed, and the comic Magnus Robot Hunter, where the robots go amok and he has to save humanity from itself and all this. But anyway, so George Jetson, right, has very, very limited requirements for his job, and yet it pays enough that he can raise a family in a sky condo. He's got 2 cars, wife, 2 kids, dog, and a robot maid. And so the concept here is that his job by today's standards is not very much, right? Like we probably wouldn't value it to pay him for that kind of lifestyle. And yet, in this future, that's just what the job pays. So I guess my question now is, do you in wherever you're living, do you see maybe that as coming forward as an idea of how to deal with something like this, where people aren't able to work as long, or are not going to have as many hours, or they're going to be working from home? Because that's an interesting thing, the work from home aspect. If more businesses jump on that, think of how much money they're saving. It's kind of like the bring your own device idea of a few years ago, where companies tried to quote unquote save on having employees bring their own equipment, or provide their own equipment. But I'm just wondering, do you see that maybe as a possibility, or a growing thing where you are living, that uh, you know job valuation will be different, where people are going to be paid a living wage, but the work that they'll be asked to do for that will be different. I mean, I guess here in the States, it's kind of the same thing as the minimum wage being tied to a living wage, and the argument for that. I think we're just going to go easy on this one. I've not made it. There we go. Drop the trailer. You can see what a difference 90 experience versus 15 makes. Alright, we're just going to keep taking a few quick jobs, I think. Oh, actually, let's go for a drive for a minute and see. Drivers with own equipment needed at the port of San Francisco. Interesting, interesting. So if I buy my own truck, I can go... I think that's a new thing. I don't remember that one. I'm going to go for a drive, and I'm just going to go see if I can't get to... I don't have my own truck to drive. Okay, well, I'll have to do it on a job. I want to go stop at the dealership and see what they have. So we're currently in Sacramento. That is a long drive. I think we'll go to Fresno. Well, I agree that meaningful work just is better all around. I mean, it helps keep people themselves happier, obviously, which has a whole knock-on list of benefits for personal life and all that. But from a work perspective, it also helps, because when you have employees that like being there and actually give a shit about the job, it's just it's better for them. Well, yeah, I mean the work from home deal does provide a lot of benefits for people who otherwise cannot get to work. And when you think about things like the cost of a vehicle and just getting to work in general, a lot of people now don't have a vehicle, or they take public transportation. I had a friend who moved down to Phoenix, Arizona, and he did not live nearby where his job was, and he actually sold his vehicle to get down there, and so he had just nothing. He had to take a bus everywhere, and he said it took an hour, almost an hour and a half, just to get there. So he spent 3 hours a day, just sitting there to get to and from work. And the same thing with people who commute. So, I mean, being able to work from home is a benefit there, in that it kind of frees up people to just not work. Um, where's the dealership? Is that the dealership? I think this might be the dealership. We're in an international now. And I mean, the pushing a button thing, I don't mean that necessarily literally, but just in the context of George Jetson, that was his job. His job was simplified. The work was taken over by machines, and it was just kind of an illustration of what life could be when the hard work is made more efficient through machines, but George Jetson himself was not removed because of that. He still had a job, and it paid him very well for minimum effort, just because the Society of the Jetsons valued that. I can see that, Untamed Fox. I can see how requiring students to log in remotely, but I mean, yes, people will skip class, or I mean, they might log in but not actually be watching the class online or whatever. Um, I can see that now being a thing where it's not terribly reliable, but a lot of education now is providing online sources, and the university that I went to here, um, I went to them a few years ago when I was looking for a job, and they were talking about how they were starting to do a lot more online courses, and how they were kind of ramping that up. That you could just anywhere in the country you could now watch and be in a class pretty much and get the same education. So, I mean, right now, maybe people aren't taking it seriously, and I have a coworker with kids who is kind of doing that as well. They've got remote learning classes and all that stuff, um, which they sometimes get. It's not really remote learning so much as there are online classes that parents need to then you know help their kids with, basically homeschooling. Um, but I think right now is that a problem because that's not the norm. And if remote learning was more normal and there was more of a, I guess, a structure behind it for requiring you to be participating in it or whatever. I mean, do you think that the problems with it now are because it's just sort of not normal and that it could be better, or do you think that that's really a detriment to education? Because personally, my take on a lot of education is that you learn better through the hands-on approach. I mean, myself, I like to read, obviously, and gain information, but then I don't. I do a lot better for retaining that when I actually do it. And so maybe the education, remote education, misses out on that. I mean, aside from the benefits of going to school and socializing and learning how to be a human being and all that. Well, Zoc, in the medical field, obviously, the requirements for the job is going to be different than, yeah, pushing a button. But even in the medical field, there are technologies that could assist in medical care to make it easier for people rather than relying purely on humans to do everything. Surely there could be something that not necessarily streamlining efficiency, because that usually has a habit of taking people out of work, but for assisting, I would think. I mean, basically, the whole concept of this idea is that it it creates less work for people, but does not take work away from them, I guess. Because in the modern way all of this seems to work is that, like I said, with efficiencies and all that, it usually means firing people because, oh, we don't need them. We can just rely on this technology or this machine to do it. But in this George Jetson post-capitalist idea, workers, work is valued in that it's seen as a necessity for people, obviously, to live, but you don't need to struggle to make that living, I guess. Yeah, I agree. The home distraction is part of the reason why I struggled so much when I got out of college and was trying to do freelancing. And even now, a lot of the projects I want to do, motivating myself even to do YouTube videos some nights is difficult. Yeah, I mean, apathy is always something that you're gonna have to fight for or fight with, I guess. Yeah, but I mean the sorry, the I don't know. I guess we'd have to go into an actual discussion about this concept because a lot of the analysis of things like this is usually reflected off of how things are now, not basically a societal change. And so you have to look at kind of how things. So here's an example. Okay, the weekend obviously did not exist for a very long time. It's a very modern concept. Okay, and the way people used to work, especially post-industrial revolution, turn of the century, uh, the turn of the 20th century. I guess I now have to be specific about that. Um, so what people did, at least here in America, is they used to have basically a 6-day work week, and they'd get Sunday off for religious reasons mostly. But most people just worked all the time, and they didn't work for necessarily sustainable wages. They pretty much worked for just living wages, sustenance level wages, and so they had to work. And along came this concept later on of providing the weekend. That this idea for workers, the pro-worker movement and pro-labor movement at the time tried to introduce the concept of limited hours and and a day off, an extra day off. And there was backlash from both sides. Obviously, the industrialists were like, "Well, what the hell? You're stealing a day of work out of our factories. We're going to lose money on this stuff." And the concept of a minimum wage, just, are you freaking kidding me? Like, because a lot of the times workers would bid on their wages. Like they would actually go to the factory or whatever, and the lowest bidders would get to work that day. So this concept that, oh my God, we have to pay more? Are you kidding? I mean, that goes on to today. Anytime there's a minimum wage fight, business owners immediately think, oh, you're just stealing money out of my pockets. And workers were also opposed to this weekend idea because they saw it as, you're stealing a day from me, a day off. Why would I want that? I need this money. Just the concept of regulated work and a living wage and all of that was not relative to them. So they didn't understand it, and many people were opposed to it. But also, what's interesting is Henry Ford was actually all about it. And Henry Ford, I would not think anyone would call a socialist. I mean, he's one of the American industrialists that are like the poster children for that time. But he was totally into the higher wages, not necessarily minimum wage, higher wages and the extra time off. And people, his peers were like, "Are you crazy? You're going to lose money on this." And he said, if people don't have enough money, if my workers don't have the money, they'll never buy my cars. And if I don't give them time off, they'll never drive them. Because, in those days, people didn't drive to work. They usually lived around where they worked. Driving was for the wealthy, that they could just take a drive out to the country or whatever. You didn't necessarily have driving as part of your life. And so the way he saw it was, well, hey, like, I can't just starve my people and this isn't sustainable. This doesn't work for me as a business. I sell something that people need to be able to buy and then use. Because if they have no incentive to use it, they're not going to spend the money to buy it. So, it's just a different perspective on a society that at the time, that's not how things worked. I mean, yeah, the those studies are actually pretty interesting, but it makes a lot of sense because it's really not necessary for long, long hour days. But so taking that, like a 6 hour work day versus an 8 hour work day, uh, you could have split days. And my work has kind of started doing like a split shift thing, um, because we were just an 8 to 5 thing, and then they decided to open at 7:30 and then go to 5:30, and so now there's kind of that shift where if you start at 7:30, you get off earlier, you get off at 4:30, and then if you start later at like 8:30, then you get off at 5:30. And so, obviously the more extreme version of that is doing like a split shift, early hour shift and then a late shift. But currently in America anyway, in the United States, that would be a part-time deal. If you worked less hours, you're now part-time wages. So what that is trying to fit that concept of less work days in the current system, meaning less work, less pay. But in this idea, like this George Jetson idea, you'd be working the first half of the day or whatever, but your pay would still be enough to afford you the livelihood. And I feel like that's where that backlash is coming in from, the business again. It's the same thing as when the weekend was introduced or the 40-hour work week was introduced. It was just like, all right, why would we do that? Why would we pay people more for less work? Not understanding the fact that people who have money will spend the money, and then that's actually what keeps the economy going. Well, yes, but I have a history degree. History has always fascinated me, and with history you can kind of see trends and the cause and effect. Obviously retrospectively, but relying on people to be reasonable and rational and make the decision to do this, that's generally not how things work. Like I said, with the people that were opposed to having an extra day off or something like that, it's like, why would I do that? I'm going to lose out on this money that I need. Generally, large changes happen externally because of like an economy crashing or the Black Death, or the some external thing happens that creates a crisis that then people react to. So like the things from the New Deal, Roosevelt's New Deal in the 30s and 40s. I mean, with the workers' rights, the pro-union help, things like the work projects where the government actually paid people to do things just so that they could stay employed and afford things. The paying of farmers not to grow crops. Like Roosevelt's detractors were screaming socialism at the time, even Social Security. Like there was a backlash against that, but you look at the benefits that that created down the line, and retrospectively, people think, no one today in the United States would give up Social Security. And it makes a lot of sense because I, who am years away from ever taking Social Security, think it's a good idea too. Not just because someday I'll need it, but prior to Social Security, the way you took care of old people was they lived with you. Mom and Dad lived in the attic, and the extended family. I don't want that. I don't want to take care of my parents. I'm scooting along as it is on my own. I don't want to have that. So Social Security serves a purpose where it creates, it allows older people to be independent, because not everyone's going to have a pension, especially not in American jobs that don't provide that sort of thing. So I mean, but all of those came out of the atmosphere. The depression allowed for that, because when things are going well, people don't want change, and they wouldn't see the benefit in doing something like that. Likewise, the Black Death in medieval times completely changed the social landscape of people in Europe, because the economies during the medieval ages were basically dependent upon people. How many peasants could you get to cultivate your land? And the Black Death wiping out so many people made human life more valuable, and so more freedoms were opened up for people, to the point that it led to free cities and the merchant class, and it just completely changed how things worked. But you would never have seen society change like that without that external thing happening, without that complete shift in changing the norm. And so, going back to my original question for all of this, we're seeing changes again, because something like a global pandemic changes the way that people are doing work. They're having to work remotely. Same thing with the global collapse in 2008 of the economy brought the rise of the gig economy, and all these freelancing things that you could do, and a lot more of a shift towards having a side gig at home of anything. I mean, Etsy really took a boom, and I think maybe even came out of that. All the freelancing websites, Fiverr, for example. I mean, just all these external events are what pushes the reaction. It's not rational, reasonable people thinking this is how we should do something, and then everyone agrees to do it. Right, but I think it goes back to kind of the idea of just being at the right place at the right time. Getting people to agree on that despite their extreme views. A lot of that goes away when you're in crisis, because I mean, you think about well, I mean, just recently, the as soon as this pandemic started uh, in the United States, the government handed out $1,200 for everyone, and that was supposed to be stimulus so that they could keep paying their bills, keep purchasing purchasing goods, and then businesses could still be making money and all that. But I mean, this came from a Republican administration that supposedly is against that sort of thing. So, I mean, I feel like the reaction to reality eventually overcomes any kind of personal belief and personal creed, I guess. At some point something happens where it reaches a critical mass of support, and that's just how it is. Social Security in the United States, for example, like at any time that would have been considered, especially in like the Gilded Age prior to that, that would have been impossible. But when people are desperate and the social safety net is completely broken apart, then people are more open to changes like that. So, I mean, maybe right now things aren't at a critical mass enough that some big change like that would come about. I mean, you can kind of see that here in the United States with the reaction to the coronavirus and how even just 2 weeks after the whole lockdown thing started in the States, people were like, "Oh, we just need to open up because I want to get out and go back to normal." It's like, well, that's not how that works anymore. But it just hadn't impacted enough, and arguably it still hasn't impacted hard enough. But in a big crisis that is tangible to a lot of people, you see a lot of changes. I mean, after 2008, there was a lot of support suddenly for regulating the banks. Something that a lot of people, for whatever reason, are opposed to because the market should be free. How do we even get on this topic? What were we talking about?